George Washington Dunham. But I can't tell you what year he was born. It's in my book. I can go get my ones. I have the history for 8 years, 8 generations back. But he owned all the land on the Maple Street side and then down around on Walnut Street, that whole block. And he sold the houses off on the bottom street of Walnut to the people who were the miners. They built mining houses for them there. And then the Maple Street, he sold off in different lots too. And my mother once said, if you lived on Maple Street, you were one of the richest people in Friendsville. So there you are. I worked at the Grand Theater after B.I. Gonder took it over. The Opera House was upstairs at first over the old bank building, and then it was down at the theater too. And my mother said that they would make scenes, and then the school kids would go there and put on plays too. Yeah, but then when Mr. B.I. Garner took it over, I first made popcorn, and then I collected tickets, and then I rose up to be the seller of tickets at the window. I was only 15, 16, and 17, I think, when I worked there.
Mm-hmm. And it was a pretty big deal for folks? They would...
Oh, everybody liked the Grand Theater. They had an upstairs balcony and a downstairs. They would take the children down to watch different movies, different afternoons for special things.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'd have people that came and put on shows on the stage. So it was very nice. The train didn't come to Friendsville too many years after I was born. I wasn't old enough really to remember, but I knew where the tracks were and where the station was and all that. But you could still hear the train in Confluence here at Sauron in our town. My mother's been dead 18 years. Her name was Margaret Shoemaker.
Okay.
And she wrote for the Republican paper as the Friendsville writer for the Friendsville News Items. And she didn't work out of the home. She raised 5 children, took care of her mother and father, great-grandmother and grandfather. So, but I could tell you, she could remember and tell you anything and everything about Friendsville. That's where I learned a lot from her and my grandfather. Her father was Bill Dunham, which I told you was the barber.
Yeah.
And he, before he did barbering, he worked at Kendall in the lumberyard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have a picture, I think, of him sitting on the log truck. And then he was a famous ball player. I gave it to the Friends Museum. He was on the Friendsville ball team.
Yeah.
And then they had the Friendsville Park, or they used to, on Maple Street behind Herschel Allen's house and Pam Umberson's house was the Friendsville Park. And that's where they went to play games and everything. They also had a tennis court below Senator McCullough's house down there where they played tennis, the girls.
High school?
I went to Friendsville till 10th grade, and then I went to Northern High.
Okay.
And I was the second class to graduate up there in 1954.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And I've been out of school 62 years. This will be 63. I'm 80 years older. And here you're trying to get all this information out of an old lady. My husband Jim worked for Foster Frazie's lumber company, and he worked for Red Rock. After Frazee first, before he went to the state highway, and then after he retired from the state highway, he went to Red Rock and hauled lumber for them, and he also hauled for Jim Wetzel over in Addison until he retired, finally.
Gotcha.
First of all, we had to get our work done at home and pick bean beetles, or we didn't get to go swimming at Crusher or over at the depot, and all we did was ride bikes, roller skate. Well, Jim was on town council when the freeway went through and the new water system. He was also mayor of Friendsville for 2 years and was on the council for 22 years. I have pictures of the freeway when they snipped the ribbon up here and cut it, and have all that in my scrapbook too. Well, it has brought traffic to Friendsville, through Friendsville and above Friendsville.
Yeah.
Played basketball at the Friendsville School up here in 51, 52, and they called me Hot Shot Dot. I got to play on the senior team, yeah. So that's where my son and my grandson get all their ball playing from. Of course, I had 2 brothers that played too and were really good players. One got a scholarship. And my just my grandmother was Mary Catherine Verena Hempfling Dunham. She was German, and she was from the accident area. Her father and mother came over here from Germany, and she was born in accident. She was a telephone in the Senator McCullough's house. I have a picture of her doing it. Plus, she was a seamstress, and she sewed for many and many of women all her life. I worked for Olin Friend at the Clover Farm store then, which is now S&S Market. Oh, he was great. I called him Father Friend, and he said I was one of his daughters. And I worked for him for 2.5 years. Yeah, he was great.
And he was handicapped, right?
Right, he had his arm taken off in the hayfields. And each morning when I'd go to work, he'd have me roll his sleeve up and fix his sleeve for him.
And
you were out close to Marilyn.
More
in there.
Right.
Marilyn was my best friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was sad.
Yeah, I miss Marilyn. She was a huge.
She
gave a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
When she moved here, somebody told her Dottie Spear would do anything for you. Well, Dottie Spear did everything he could for her. She'd call and say, "Tell Jim, I have a job for him today." So she was a great person. Jim really appreciated her too.
Yeah. Yeah, she left a big hole.
That was my very first job in Friendsville, working at Augie Now's Jewelry Shop. He lived right across the street from S&S Market, and he had his shop on one side and he lived on the other. And then he built a big home up here on Oak Street. So when he would go away, my grandmother lived in the house on the side, he'd have her watch the store for his jewelry store and his comic books and music. Well, she didn't want to stay by herself, so I had to stay there and help her. It was a 2-seater, and it was, I think, a Chevrolet, and it was one of those old-fashioned kind, and you could pull the blinds down. So when my sister Virginia learned to drive, us girls would get in it. We'd ride around town. We'd pull the blinds down so nobody could see who was in it.
Do you remember Pappy Ross at all?
Oh, yeah. Pappy Ross is in my book. He had a deer in a baby crib in the middle of his living room floor, and somebody out of Baltimore sent me the picture back, and I put it in my scrapbook. And his boys and I talk about that all the time.
And who was in the crib?
A deer.
Oh, a deer.
A real deer, a little fawn. And he kept it in his house.
Tell me about Ed Slager.
He called me a damn dumb shoemaker. Take that off. Down at the store, when I worked at the store, I'd wait on him. He lived across the river. He lived on the back porch wherever he could find a place to hang his hat. I knew the whole family. His oldest brother, he would butcher for people, and then you'd have him for meals, and he'd help you butcher your cows or your pigs or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And somebody told me that Ed Slager was the last person born in Kendall or something.
Yeah, Jim was talking about that. He was afraid to come down out of there, and they tied a bag of bushes over his head so he couldn't see where he was going to bring him down.
Oh, to bring him down out of
Kendall. That's what Jim was telling somebody here last night, talking about that. Dirty hat, slouch hat, an old overcoat, old shoes, but he had a good heart. He just wanted somebody to notice him. Was all it was. And when you didn't, then he did funny things. I have worked at pretty every store place in Friendsville, or helped. I worked at the first was the August Now in the theater, and then for S&S Market, and then I volunteered.
Well, first it was the Clover Farm. You worked for.
Well, it
yeah.
was the Clover Farm.
Right.
Then at the old bank building, which is the museum now, is where the library used to be. I volunteered there. And when I moved to Friendsville, I worked at the bank for 10 years as a janitor. I was a substitute teacher up at the school. I volunteered at the library, then I got hired at the library, and I worked for 18 years there. And I worked for 18 years for the town of Friendsville for water and sewer clerk. But I had 3 jobs at one time: the town of Friendsville, the library, and the bank. But they're no big jobs.
Right.
And so I had keys for all them buildings. And the only place I never worked at was the restaurant, which is Jubilee Diner now. I never worked there. Oh, that's my husband's tale. He was born with, some people are born with a silver spoon. He was born with a pitchfork in his mouth. We've had horses probably we've been married 60 years, probably 40. But when they opened the freeway, I-68, Jim took our horses and covered wagon down there, and he hauled the governor and the mayors and all that across the line. He was first in line, and the antique cars were all next. He has pictures of that. Main job was collecting news for my mother for the paper. And we went from house to house, my brother and I, and they would give you church news and religious news for that week of their groups, and people who visited say, I visited you, you visited me. It used to be they put it all in the paper, and she wrote for the Republican paper all those years, the Friendsville News Items. That was my main job with my brother and I. We had to do that every Monday night. Because then she wrote it on Tuesday and the paper come out Thursday, you know.
And do you have a lot of...
place, Clarence and Tilly Niccolo, which would have been my aunt and uncle. But we went there every Saturday night for bologna and cheese and chocolate cake. My grandmother, which was her sister, we'd always go over on Saturday evening when my grandfather closed the barber shop, and we'd go over to socialize, and that's what she would feed us. And we'd get out there and go in the dance around in the hallway, and they had that big staircase clear to the top. It was a beautiful place. I was so sad when they tore it down.